the simple question, which needs practice, and it has this taboo and it's all this nonsense around the stigma around how awkward or whatever.
Yep.
Get over it. It's a simple question. It's just, have you been thinking about taking your own life?
Jackson Godding put himself on the path to becoming a psychotherapist for men when he lost a mate to suicide. As is often the case for those directly affected by suicide, feeling that immense pain motivated him to do something about it. Already a trained psychologist, he started working for Lifeline while completing a master's degree in psychotherapy and counselling, with the specific intention to treat men grappling with mental illness and addiction.
I don't know if you've ever received advice. A lot of the time it's not helpful. It's not asked for either.
Jackson has lived experience of depression, anxiety and relationship issues, and now uses the lessons he learned from the dark times he went through to help other men overcome their obstacles.
I tell everybody that. That's hard to hear. It's a hard thing to get your head around. It's like, what do you mean I'm not going to be better and fixed? It's like, no, it's an ongoing thing that you'll find freedom in.
He runs his own psychotherapy practice in Sydney called Find Reason Therapy and manages to coordinate a drug and alcohol service too. He's dedicated his life to serving men and has plenty to share that can help all of us help ourselves and our mates.
Welcome to Young Blood, a podcast all about young men's health. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our mission to talk about the stuff that matters and isn't talked about enough. Let's do it.
So Jackson, when did it hit you that men's mental health was an area that really needed your energy and attention?
Mate, how old was I? I was probably 20, I think. I was at uni, and it's a pretty crazy story. We were selecting the things that we were wanting to do for placement. You had a list of your top 6, and my top 1 and top 2 were just general things in the community, helping with students or going and practicing in a clinic. And what I ended up getting at the time was my 6th choice. Now, everybody else was getting their 1st and 2nd choice. Which bloody bullshit. My 6th choice was Suicide Prevention Australia. And that was going to be developing an app to actually support people going through mental health. And actually, the project that we were doing actually helped to develop what's called Beyond Now, which is an amazing suicide prevention app that's massive now in Australia. Now, the next part of that story gets crazy. At the same time, in the same tutorial, I was trying to find out this and being pissed off that I got my 6th thing. My mate left the room. And came back and didn't come back. And what I was soon found out is that one of our good mates had just killed himself. And, my whole body sort of shut down in that moment. And he was a lot closer than I was to him, but, still quite a good mate. And yeah, it just rocked me. And then obviously the coincidence of me getting my 6th choice being suicide prevention just really started that whole journey for me. So that I guess was the start of it. Fast forward to the actual funeral. So I'm down in Sydney and he went to a private boys' school in the North Shore, and the funeral was packed, as you can imagine. Just so many of his mates and close mates and outside of school mates. And yeah, it was just, I didn't go to his school, so I was a bit further back, and all the boys were together, surrounding him at the front of the venue, and just the shock and disbelief of people and his good friends, just having no idea that he was struggling with depression, having no idea that anything was going wrong for him, to the point of considering suicide. And at the time I'm studying psych, I'm quite a young psych, still being a little bit of a rat bag, straight out of school, going, still going, I wonder what I'm going to actually do with psychology. What am I actually going to do with counselling?
Yeah, so you just had a general interest in it, but you weren't sure where you were going to take it.
Yeah, I didn't know how I was going to niche down yet. And just the lack of awareness and the lack of ability for this guy to reach out at the time. And this is also at the time where depression and anxiety was starting to get on the rise, I guess, a little bit. This is only 5-6 years ago. And yet still no one had a clue. And that was when I was like, you know what, I can make a difference. Like I can start to do this sort of thing. I can put suicide prevention on the map. I can educate all my close friends with this stuff, and I can stop and prevent this from happening. And yeah, it was from there. It just sort of was like, cool, this is all I want to do now, and this is what I want to focus on.
And I guess taking that on, that suddenly that's driven by some very deep, strong emotions. Just take us through, you said obviously it rocked you, and I totally relate to that because the same thing happened to me, but just how did it change your perspective on life, and what did you take away from going to that funeral? What are some of the deep feelings and memories that you have from that moment?
I don't tell the story that much, but when I do tell, like my body sort of still goes through like, goosebumps and chills down my back. So even today, it's such a highly driven emotional experience to me, and I'm so aware of that in my body. At the time, it was just gut wrenching to see how many people were so impacted by it, and direct impact on me, being quite a close friend and even someone in this profession having no idea that was going on for him.
Well, that's the scariest thing about it. And what we see also all too often is, people who others would never have guessed. They never think that someone would be, even depressed, or certainly not to that level. And it's just so insidious how much it can develop, and people can get really, really, really dark without others noticing.
The biggest impact on me was my powerlessness. Just how powerless I was in that moment at that time. And then, coming out of the doors of that funeral and just seeing the pure grief of each, strong young man coming out of there, bawling their eyes out and not knowing how to control or contain themselves. And I think that, I guess, the power in that, there's a lot of hindsight there where it's like, witnessing that sort of thing and the power of what these feelings have created for so many people was actually a big part of the drive that goes, there's a reason people are so emotional about this stuff, because they did not want it to happen and they wish they could do something about it before it was too late.
The thing that really struck me going to my friend's funeral as well was how many people there were there and how many people were so desperately upset by it. And it just showed that there were all these people there for him who loved him this much, but yet he got himself into a state where he couldn't see that. And I think probably saw himself as a burden. And it's just like people who end up in this state, they have so many people around that do love them that probably they could reach out to, but it's lost in that spiral.
Yeah, definitely think it's I probably experienced it similarly, a lot of those feelings in my past as well. I actually might have happened after that, not directly related to that, but just through my own difficult relationships and just learning what my identity was and learning more about myself and going through some really tough and hard challenges. The big thing for me was really noticing depression come in and letting it be really overwhelming and taking control, and then the anxiety on top of that, and then that masked with the fact that I am a professional trying to study to help people, and I was afraid to ask for help. I was terrified that if I'm unwell, how the fuck am I supposed to be well for others? And help them. And that really played a lot on my mind. And there was a point where I was suicidal, briefly for one point in that. And the massive part of all that was, I really resonated with anyone that's been through that stuff. And it is that dark place that you were saying that it defies logic and reason.
But I suppose that's probably helpful to you now because it allows you to understand that depth of feeling, and you can really relate to sort of what people go through and the fact that it's not necessarily logical. A lot of it's emotional, and you understand that better than most, which must be really useful in your professional work. When did you experience your mental health struggles?
The biggest impact for me when I started really struggling with it was I was in a relationship, and I guess we both, when you're in a relationship, you meet a person and they bring all of their shit, and then you bring all of yours, and then you try and have a healthy relationship, or you try and, mesh together and figure something out. Now, that has so much variables of whether that's going to go well or not go well. And for me, I really struggled, and I really started to have a big impact with my depression. And yeah, I think I was about 20, 22, 23. And yeah, that's probably when it all started to happen and get a bit out of control, before I really even realized it was, at a toxic place, in a toxic relationship. Like, I loved them so dearly, and I would do anything for them and try anything at all to fix and help this relationship. And the aftermath was that is my own emotional, roller coaster of what that led to. Yeah.
Lots of personal examples of this profession that you're studying for actually happening to you whilst you were learning about it. So that must have been like a really visceral sort of experience to be learning about these things that you were personally actually going through.
I started to have what was called, the imposter syndrome. I was like, how the hell are you supposed to do this work? How are you honestly going to do that when you're unable to help the relationship that you're in and try to fix the problems that you have and the relationship has? If you can't do that, how the hell are you supposed to do this?
Yeah.
The irony is, the first time I went to see a therapist and a counselor, naturally that's a hard decision for a lot of people, and one of the best ones to make. But I walked in there at a time of readiness that was just non-existent. And I went in and I sat down and I said, I want to learn some skills to be able to help my partner, and for anyone that's been in counseling, and for any counselor or psychologist that sits in front of that type of person, is okay, this is going to be challenging to realize that it's about them,
right,
and that person that needs to do the work on themselves. I was so obsessed with fixing and helping others that I went to counseling and said, how, write me a list of things that I can do for them, and let's disregard all of me.
Yeah, so it was like a let me stop you right there sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. He started to tell me, some hard truths. You need to work on you. And I was like, don't be ridiculous. You have no idea what you're talking about. Where did you even study? But, soon, quite a while after that, I realized how right he was. And that was the biggest part of my journey, is starting to really look inside myself and really find out what it was, the role that I play in relationships, and what it means to me. And the biggest thing that I found out of that is, extreme example that I always use is a thing called codependency. And to describe that, I say, if you, my loved one, were cold, and you asked, and told me that you were cold. Now, a normal person reaction might be, all right, I'll take my jacket off and I'll keep you warm. Now, a codependent, or myself, for the best example, is I would say in response to that, I will light myself on fire to keep you warm.
Yeah, so totally sacrifice yourself for what you imagine is the needs of someone else.
100%. So, the only thing that mattered is meeting the needs of others in order for me to gain my self-worth and my self-esteem. And, that's how I lived. And that is my default to this day, that I really have to challenge and work on. And it's taken a long time to get to that point through, vulnerability, intense self-awareness, and just, reflection on really breaking that stuff down so that I can understand how to not only be okay for me, but then be able to support other people.
And how have you been able to overcome that depression and anxiety and do all that self-work? And what have been the things that have really allowed you to grow from that experience and now be able to help people?
The biggest thing is, and the number one and the best starting point is awareness. If you got the light off and you try to find something, you're going to struggle. But when I was able to start to turn my light on, or dim a switch and slowly bring it on, and start having awareness about what it was that was happening, and the role that I play in my own life and in relationship and in just anything to do with how I interact with the world. It's had to start there. From there, it was trial and error. It was really trial and error. I lean towards coping mechanisms that are negative, drugs, alcohol, toxic relationships. If these are all your defaults and go-to, you have to really challenge and think about things in another way of how you're going to do this. I found yoga, and yoga was so powerful and all about connecting the mind and the body and really regulating myself and learning what was happening and going on for me. And I think that was the best thing I did. What I found, though, is, all of a sudden I was at Bali yoga retreats and doing yoga retreats in Sydney, and then doing it every single day. And I turned it into this addiction.
Right.
I turned it in. It was my only way to cope, and I'm going to throw myself at it, and started being, bloody vegan, vegetarian.
Yeah. So your ego latched on to being that guy.
Yeah. So I thought, I found this saving thing that's going to help me, and I'm just going to jump on it and hope that for the best. And again, like I said, trial and error. I had to learn how to moderate, how everything needs to be taken in moderation, and find a good, comfortable balance. And, yoga is a good example of actually finding that equilibrium with yourself and finding what's going to work and not work with you. That was a big part of where I started. That, coupled with a lot of therapy, finding the right therapist and just being able to talk through that stuff. Overall, that's coupling all the things that you need to do are so important to find you and understand you. But from there, it's about what you do to look after that, that new thing that you found about yourself, or that new identity that you so now cherish. If you're not looking after yourself, if self-care isn't a number one priority for you, and you have an inventory of lists of things that you need to do to stay well, then you'll fall and shit will spill out sideways.
Yeah, so it takes work. You have to be disciplined and stay on top of it. Same as your physical health. You have to keep working on your mental health. Even when you feel like you've found an answer, that's not enough to just have a one-off and be like, okay, I'm all good forever now. You still have to make sure you're working on it all the time.
Yeah, I did yoga that one time. I'm good now.
Yeah. That was easy.
Yeah.
And you were working at Lifeline as well?
Yeah. So I guess the start of that journey for me, in terms of getting into the work, is I was finishing up after my friend died, getting close to finishing the psych degree, and I applied for my master's in counselling and psychotherapy. That was the direction that I wanted to go in, and really learn about the underlying parts of the mind and being able to really hold people in a space so that they can connect with themselves and connect with others in order for them to grow. And I thought, what's a good way to couple? I can't just study and never get the work experience. And Lifeline was the 100% the best option for me, someone that wanted to focus on suicide prevention. So I trained and did that while I studied, and then got straight onto the phone. So I was working as what's called I think they've changed the name now, but it's like a telephone support caller, where you are taking phone calls. They're open 24/7, and you do 4-hour shifts. So that was the start of really getting a good understanding of people's pain and people's suffering, and what brings and leads people to suicide and just crisis in general, even if it's not suicide. What is a tipping point for people?
Yeah, I've got a very close friend who still works at Lifeline. He's been doing it for years, and it's very heavy stuff, and quite a lot of commonalities with why people get in that state, and sort of feels as though he hears the similar sort of stories again and again. How did you find working for Lifeline and constantly being confronted with those really tough stories, and having to be very careful about what you say to these people who are in this vulnerable state? And it's a very intense job to take on, and a lot of people do it for free as well. So yeah, what did you notice lots of those people had in common, and how did you keep yourself from, taking it on too much and getting too brought down by it?
So yeah, I was volunteering as well. So I guess I'd clock in at about 6 o'clock and do my 4-hour shift once a week. And you got to be in it. You got to be in a space. You have to be in a good, clear headspace to walk into that. even just the feel of a Lifeline Centre is, you're there to be someone's hope for the next 4 hours. And any phone call, I think at one point, quite regularly, you would be the only person available to talk across the whole of Australia.
Wow.
That next phone call could be one that is life or death. So just the knowledge of that being the reality, I think it speaks for itself in you have to be looking after you. You have to be really focused and connected into the work that you're doing. But yeah, it's tough. They're so good at training at Lifeline, and they're training people that aren't in my profession. They are training. I used to sit next to a miner, that just wanted to give back. They got to really educate people, just everyday average Joes, to do that sort of work. And, they have to encourage reflection, journaling, supervision to keep a level head with that stuff, because it doesn't take many calls for you to go, oh, that was a lot. And that's 4 hours.
Yeah, really full on. What were the things that you often heard from people that was driving them towards being suicidal or really struggling in those calls?
I think the big common factor, definitely for men, is their identity and not knowing who they are. And the way they respond to that or react to that, probably more appropriate, is in their loneliness and their pain, and then overall overarching and binding to all that is their shame. So I'm not good enough. I don't matter. I don't deserve. I'm not worthy. All these really, really old, deep-seated core beliefs that we all learned from a very, very young age that play out, and they're distorted views of the self that we carry. And for those that, I guess, have lived with some traumas or some very difficult things that have happened in their life or run into a crisis, that's the message that's going to pop up. And that message is like a shit mate that keeps telling you you're a bad bloke. Yeah. And it's relentless. And that was really common. It would be one of those messages. You're like, story, 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 and now I'm not good enough. Story, 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 I don't matter.
Yeah.
It would be that where you would connect with them in the way that they go, they're in pain.
Yeah. And so you'd see those patterns pop up again and again. What would you say, what advice do you have to guys out there who aren't clinically trained? They're not professionals in this field, but they've got a mate or they've got a loved one who is really struggling, and, hopefully they come to them and they open up to them. But what do we say or what do we not say? How can we all respond in that sort of a scenario? Because it can happen to anyone, and it's hard to know how to be prepared for it as well.
I think it's such an important question, Callum. I think that's something that we're getting a lot better at, in being able to understand mental health. What I will say is the most important thing is shut up. From a counsellor, shut up. But listen, essentially, is hold all your misconceptions and judgments and beliefs about what you're doing is wrong and how could you do that to me, all that sort of shit. Just put that aside for just now.
Yeah.
Complain about that after to somebody else, but in that moment, you're there to listen, and you're there to hear them out. And that might not be suicidal ideation straight away, but it's pain and struggling and grief and loss or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You're there to listen. Then from there, the most important part when we're talking about suicide prevention is what are called invitations. So if I'm telling you right now, it's all just too much, I don't think I can go on, whatever that is your threshold of, okay, that's enough, like that's crossed my little line, then that's an invitation for you to then ask this simple question, which needs practice, and it has this taboo and it's all this nonsense around, like, the stigma around how awkward or whatever.
Yep.
Get over it. It's a simple question. It's just, have you been thinking about taking your own life? or have you been considering suicide? You know, it's loaded, obviously, but if it means that they then respond, whether it's a yes or a no, the worst thing that can happen is they go, yes. You know, the best thing, I guess, you know, or they say no and they give you this look like, what are you talking about? It's not that bad. It's like, cool. Did you lose anything from asking that?
Yeah.
You know, no. They go, okay, sorry, I was a bit off on that. But the result will be that person cares a lot about me to the point where they're willing to ask me that and consider asking me that sort of thing. And that's only going to bring you closer to that person.
So what if they do say yes?
So from there, and it will happen. It happens a lot. We have the leading cause of death between 15 to 45-year-olds in suicide in Australia. It's massive, and mostly men. So, you know, a lot of the time there will be a yes, or there will be a yes or maybe, or whatever it might be. From there, you got to look at your own capacity of how much you can take on at the time. It's an emotional thing. It might be your closest friend, might be your family. So you got to be able to check yourself and be sure that you can, I guess, hold that space for them. But again, it comes back to that, you know, listen, hear what they have to say, figure out where they are with it. You know, if it's imminent risk, then every single time you're calling the police, you're calling an ambulance. If it's like right then and there, you're getting someone to call. You know, that's imminent risk, so immediate danger. And then the scale sort of bends and turns. So it's about hearing them out and listening to them, seeing who else they've told, being able to find out a little bit more information just by listening and I guess getting some questions back to them and seeing what support they have around them and try and encourage that sort of support.
Because how do you advise them, or do you advise them to say, oh, you know, and I think it might often put people off, or people be quite uncomfortable telling others to go and, you know, see someone, go and get help. I mean, that's part of the reason that we do these podcasts and that we're all in this space talking about this stuff, is we want to make it more normal so more people are comfortable doing that. But for someone who's not a professional to try and advise someone in that situation can be quite intimidating, and, you know, they feel like they're frankly unqualified. So is there a time or a way that people can tell whoever it is to go and get help from someone, or can they give practical advice in that situation? Is it subjective, or is there one thing that everyone can do other than, like, you know, once you've assessed the situation and you've listened and you've done all that, it's like, you know, what now? Do I call someone for them? Do I, you know, what do we do?
Again, it's a big question with so many variables and factors. It really depends on where they're at with their answers around it and how imminent, moderate, low risk, I guess it is. But I guess what I will say is the advice giving. I don't know if you've ever received advice. A lot of the time, it's not helpful. It's not asked for either. And that can land poorly, and you lose that connection with them. So
yeah, and that's the fear that everyone has in that sort of situation.
Yeah. And it goes down the same line when we say too quickly, go and get help, go and seek a professional. It's dismissive.
Yeah.
It's, I can't handle this because this is too much for me. It has nothing to do with them. That's too much for me. Go and seek support. Have you tried calling somebody else? Have you tried reaching out for a professional? Too soon, you know, listen to that story, hear them out a bit and try and meet their needs and ask, what is it that you need from me? How can I support you right now? From there, you know, your answers are really going to drive what comes next. But they're telling you for a reason, or you've gotten them into a conversation or a connection where they're vulnerable enough and open enough and safe enough to tell you. They've chosen you. So why you? Why are they telling you? And that means that there's a lot in there. So what do you need from me, and how can I support you? And then that answer might be, I just need you to listen to me for now and just hear me out and be there and help me and keep me safe. All very possible within your own realms. Where it starts to become out of our capacity is that's when we start to go and let them know, you know, I can do so much for you right now. and I can support you in this space, but maybe what you're asking or what you're needing means that we need to bring somebody else into this, or we need to, have you thought about telling your family, or have you thought about doing this? But once that's safe enough to do so.
Okay. So you really want to try and build that trust and show up to the trust that they've just put into you, and make them feel safer and make them feel like you're there for them and you're willing to do as much as you can. And then from that point, then ease into the next steps after that.
Yeah. And I guess I just want to clarify, we're talking about, thoughts. We're talking about thoughts of suicide. So it's conversational. It's not imminent risk. That's really important. When it's imminent, we take a much stronger and different approach with what we can handle and what we have capacity for. But everything else in the middle, it's about, exactly, building that connection and creating that safety. It may mean, we're exploring lots of those options, but it may mean just going, how can I keep you safe for now? What can we do? Maybe it's, what are you going to do for the next half an hour? Do we need to, make some sort of trust or agreement or pact or contract that means that you call me in an hour and you check back in with me, or you tell me your plan, or I'm going to go and have some dinner. I'm going to, go and do some mindfulness and breathe and calm myself down. I'll text you when I'm in bed, and then I'll message you in the morning. Right. Some sort of agreed upon plan with them and that sort of thing. And, say we'll continue to do this sort of thing moving forward tomorrow and that sort of thing. And then we start bringing in the more and more support. Again, it's that, where is it at?
Yeah.
Where is the conversation got you at? It's so not one size does not fit all with this.
Okay. Yeah. So you got to be really diligent and really try to read where it's at in terms of a crisis, and then it mostly comes down to listening and making sure they know that you're there for them at least.
I guess what I will say as well is in that break period where you're off the phone with them because they've made a agreement that they're going to go and eat or shower or calm down or whatever it might be. The amount of calls I used to take for people reaching out and asking what they can do for their friend, for their family. Ring Lifeline 13, 11, 14 and actually just say, this is my situation. This is where it's at, and get that support. That'll refuel your cup up to a point where you can then give out some more to somebody else.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to do it alone. And that those services are only for the person who's happens to be suicidal. They're also for those who are around them who need to help them. I think that's a really important point to make, that you might not think of in the moment, that you can actually go and get help in a way that isn't going to feel like you're betraying that person's trust or whatever it is, and that's probably the responsible thing to do. That's great. They're really good points and really well explained. So why psychotherapy? Why go down that route to help people versus the other directions that you can go in, and what have you found from working in that area that's able to have a specific impact on men?
So I just wanted to help people. I just wanted to start doing the work, and you can do different paths in psychology and counseling and psychotherapy. And I was so keen to just do this work. I don't need a title that says, I'm a clinical psychologist, or I'm a counselor, I'm a psychotherapist. I just want the paper that then says I can go and do work with clients and work with people. And that was the option that I chose. Little did I know that as soon as I got there, the first day, the first workshop, they said, pick a person, take them into that counseling room and counsel them. To which I was like, what do you mean? I've been reading this book trying to figure out how to do it the whole time. And they said, go and do it. You'd be surprised how much you already know, and surprised how much this is that's not able to be taught, and it's just a natural connection that you're able to make with someone. Right. So, that set up my reality of what I think about psychotherapy is it's about the other person and you in that relationship. And I'm very, relational in, like we're talking now, nothing else matters at the moment. I'm having a conversation, we're connecting, and I'm being raw and authentic with you.
Yeah.
Now, whoever walks through the door is going to get that me no matter what. And that's where I think most of my therapy and work is. And as a psychotherapist, you know, I choose to be that. I can do modalities and blah, 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 and all this shit, you know, CBT, DBT, all the therapies and stuff that there is out there and all the evidence and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, no one's going to listen to any of that shit if you don't build a relationship and connection with them that allows them to feel safe and be held. And I really found that with psychotherapy. A lot of the roles that I've had over the years, I find myself with a lot of men and boys that are, got worlds and different struggles. So I guess the common denominator for all of them is again that something's been happening for them. There's been a painful experience that they either don't know how to discuss or they find really challenging to discuss with certain people, or they've been pushed into this sort of thing. And if I sit there and pull out my book and start counseling this vulnerable man who's already not really feeling comfortable to be there,
yeah,
I'm going to lose them straight away.
Right.
I guess the work that I do is so focused on, let's just have a chat. I just want to know more about you.
Yeah, so again, you have to just listen, build that trust like we were talking about before, because you can't just dump that advice and be telling them what to do straight away because you haven't got to that point yet.
Yeah, and I think with men, actually, and women, but a lot with men is if you're vulnerable with them, and I guess mirror and model that, then it's going to make it easier for them to be able to do that. And I share a lot of my story. I share a lot of my lived experience. I share a lot of my things that worked and didn't work with all my clients, and I'm very open about that. So I guess the work that I've done has allowed me to do that sort of thing and taught me that that's okay.
Yeah, and I guess so in hindsight for you now, those experiences that you went through that were really hard at the time, they've actually helped you massively now to be able to connect with and help people. And you used to question whether you were going to be able to be a psychotherapist or a psychologist when you couldn't deal with your own issues. But actually, it turns out that is the very reason why you should be doing it. So that must be cool for you.
It's great. I mean, I don't take myself too seriously as well. So I'll run groups and I'll be writing stuff on the board or doing a process with these guys, and then just stop them and go, now let's just make everything clear. I am perfectly imperfect and I fuck up all the time. And just leave that with them and say, I'm not trying to tell you that I know the answer and in this perfect format and this is exactly how it things, and I've never had anything go wrong since.
No.
It's like, I'm perfectly imperfect, and that's so important to name with people. And I guess bringing in my story means like, when I'm talking about whatever it is that I'm treating, anxiety, depression, trauma, post-traumatic trauma, like it's just like, yeah, like I get it. This has been my experience, and does that resonate with you? And everyone's story is different, but our emotions are the same.
And what helps those men overcome those things and get better? And when do you see them really make progress and change their lives?
It's so different for so many. So I used to work for intensive statewide services for family and community service, so FACS or DOCS or whatever they're called now. And I worked with kids that were, the most traumatized in the state. And they weren't being able to be placed with foster or anything. They were, I guess, too high risk to be in those situations with placements.
Yeah.
And that meant that they have had this inconsistency and unpredictability from the age of 0 up until now. So I was, I had a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old, and 2 17-year-olds, I think. And they've only ever had this inconsistent experience with life, where I found a lot with them, and these are young, traumatized men. You need to build with consistency. You need to be predictable for them and create a new pattern for them that is, building a new attachment. And that, again, it comes back to that. I'm going to create a bond with you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to reject you. And until we can feel a bit safer in that, and that takes a long time with very young traumatized children. Trust is all the way over here. But until then, that's when you start to see what they can give, and they'll only give what they can give. And then you just take that, just a tiny bit of that, and you run with that and say, I'm going to honor what you've shared with me and take a little bit more and get them further and further. Now, all the adults that I treat, they're just big kids. They're the same. You know, they have hard things that they've been through and they've experienced, and maybe haven't known how to regulate themselves or come to an understanding of what's been going on for you, and they keep doing the same old shit, getting the same old results.
Yep.
And you then offer this different path, just a smidgen, just a little tour of this, what things can start to look like if we have this consistency, this trust, this safety that's established. And those are all big words that men go, whoa, don't say vulnerability, don't say safety around me. Like, so frame it in a different way, but it's like, let's just be real first. You know, let's get to a point where you can ease and settle into the experience of counseling and psychotherapy in groups.
And where do things like consistency and routine come into it for men a lot of the time, and also the need to fulfill a role? Is that something that is really necessary, have you found, for men to feel like they have a role to fulfill and that they are capable of doing that, and that they have a consistent sort of a day or a lifestyle?
I think a lot of the guys that rock up are missing all of that. So their routine isn't there, their structure isn't there. And I work with a lot of addiction. So addiction is just causing chaos in their life. And the opposite of addiction is connection. And these guys therefore don't have connection. So if I'm disconnected in everything that I do revolving around drugs, that's going to ripple effect into everything in my life, my job, my relationships, my well-being, my social, my emotional. Like it just cascades. So they end up with just this unstructured, no routine, survival only sort of reality. And it's about slowing that person down and going, here's where things are going wrong. Here's where things are not working out right now. And take that apart slowly rather than going, everything's fucked. Let's do it all at once. Yeah. It's like, break it down. You came here for this. Let's focus on that for now. We'll get to all this other stuff as it comes.
Yeah. Because it's too overwhelming if it's all together. So everything you do is about making it tolerable bit by bit and then building on that and expanding. And before you know it, the person's a different person. It's pretty amazing work. It must be really rewarding for you now to be able to have that impact when, you're someone who needed that help not too long ago.
Yeah. And recovery is an ongoing journey. They don't really say recovered. I don't. It's an ongoing thing. Recovery is, I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm always challenging myself, and I'm always slipping up too. So I'm accountable for my own actions, and I'm accountable for my own choice to react or respond to things. And when I have that accountability and consistency with that, I'm able to go and check myself. And that means recovery is an ongoing thing for me. And I tell everybody that. That's hard to hear. It's a hard thing to get your head around. It's like, what do you mean? I'm not going to be better and fixed. It's like, no, it's an ongoing thing that you'll find freedom in, but it will be something that you then must pursue and look after yourself. We all have to do it.
Awesome, man. Well, you're definitely leading the way in this area, and it's really cool to hear from someone who's had a story like you have and who's put in so much effort to wanting to make an impact, because of your own experience and what you've been through, but then also just seeing the need out there, and also being a young guy yourself who can really speak to this age group and really have that impact because you've been there and people can relate to you. And it's not about trying to be above people or to say that, I've never been through any of that myself, I'm too good for it. You're really someone who has been there and has made those changes and now can help others to do that. So I think that's immensely powerful. We've got to wrap it up, but what's one thing that you would say to young men at the moment. It can be anything at all, just about engaging with their health and with each other. Is there anything you can leave us with?
You've got to look after yourself first. The rest will come. Being able to help others will come. Being a provider and being that role that men are meant to have in our stereotypical society, is that stuff will come and will be achievable if we're able to reflect and look internally into ourselves first. And the best and easiest way to start by doing that is tap into what you really do to look after yourself and what you notice feels good, whether it's exercise, whether it's cooking, whether it's fishing, whatever that little thing is. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's calling a friend. Is finding what works for you and doing those things in your self-care routine daily. Notice when those things aren't happening. Right now, coronavirus, it's we're not able to do the things that we're normally able to do. We can't go to the gym. We got to be innovative and say, well, I can't not go to the gym, and you still need that cup to fill back up for me in my self-care. So I need to think of how I can then meet it, rather than I'll just not go for the next 10 weeks or whatever, because you'll notice back off the path or fall out and spill out a bit sideways. So self-care is look at what works for you and what fills your cup up.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that stuff. You just, you say it in such a easily digestible, real way that I think people will resonate with. And that's obviously a big part of your success. So keep doing what you're doing, keep leading the way, and let's stay in touch, man. Also, just quickly, just tell people what your podcast is and where they can find that.
Yeah. So I have a podcast as well. It's called Reason With Me, where I talk about ideas and topics and different conversations that challenge the mind and all relate back to our connection, our mental health, and our well-being. That's across Spotify, all, Apple Podcasts, all the things. And you can find me on Find Reason Therapy. I got online counseling, but also face-to-face counseling as well, and heaps of blogs and other information that you want to get on there, and access to the podcast on there as well.
You're a legend, man. Keep doing good work and fighting the good fight, and we'll get there eventually. Good on you.
If you got something out of this episode, please leave a comment and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us grow the show so we can keep bringing you the content that matters. If you want to stay up to date with what we're doing and get involved, get onto the Youngblood Podcast Community Facebook group and follow Youngblood Podcast on Instagram. And if you're keen to get in touch with me, email youngbloodpodcast, all one word, @hotmail.com. This podcast was produced by the talented Rory Noak at Podbooth. You can check them out at podbooth.com.au. This is Youngblood. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time.